Warning. The following program is a satirical look at Indigenous news, politics, and current events. Reconciliation is advised.
If I wanted you, girl, would you want me to? If I needed you, girl, would you need me to? I can love you, girl, the whole night through. I can love you, girl, till the morning comes.
Anin, bonjour, hello, welcome to the show. You know, folks, at the Laughing Drum, we don't believe in blood quantum, but if we did, ours would be 282%, and yours would be hovering around the 102% mark just by watching us. We've got an exciting show tonight. Gitsan author Brett Hewson is here to talk about his beautiful children's book, The Sockeye Mother, and we'll check in with our distinguished Red Power panel. But first, let's take a look at what's happening on the news. We start in politics, where big changes are coming to how major natural resource projects like mines, hydro dams, and pipelines are approved.
We will make it mandatory to consider Indigenous traditional knowledge alongside science and other evidence. Indigenous jurisdictions will have greater opportunities to exercise powers and duties under the new Impact Assessment Act.
Well, that sounds nice. The Liberals say the new Streamlined system will allow regulators to hear directly from environmentalists and Indigenous peoples when making decisions, something that didn't always happen in the past. New projects will also be approved or denied within 2 years, which means First Nations won't have to wait quite as long to find out when their rights are going to be steamrolled by industry and government. Progress. In science news, researchers announced that a Brit who lived 10,000 years ago had light eyes but dark skin and hair. Scientists made the announcement after analyzing the DNA of a skeleton called Cheddar Man, named because he was found in a cave near Cheddar Gorge in England.
Scientists say that shows that lighter skin of so-called modern Europeans is actually a relatively recent phenomenon.
This amazing discovery can only mean one thing: that there are a lot of white supremacists who aren't sure how they feel about themselves today. Also in related news, scientists are trying to determine whether legendary Cree singer-songwriter Ernest Monias was on tour in England 10,000 years ago. Back to politics. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spent most of last week in the United States trying to drum up trade.
Tomorrow, Trudeau meets with Amazon chief Jeff Bezos. Canada is courting the company to build a massive new headquarters in Toronto, Lisa.
The Prime Minister also met with executives from online shopping giant Amazon, who are shopping for a second location for one of their headquarters. Trudeau attempted to sweeten the deal by telling Amazon execs that he could arrange for them to disappoint some Indigenous peoples if that's what they're into. All right, enough of the news. If there's one thing Indigenous peoples love, it's social media. Twitter, YouTube, Instagrams, and of course, Facebook have become the new intertribal. That's why we're starting a new segment called Indigenous Folks Winning the Internet. We've scoured the web when we should have been working to find the finest nuggets of digital joy to serve up on Bannock and present to you. We start in the north, where globe-trotting Inuit become the subject of this meme. That could easily apply to First Nations in the south, too. Told you. And legendary singer-songwriter Ernest Monias is even more legendary online. Check out these. He's even on money. And it wouldn't be Indigenous social media without some jokes about Bannock, like this one. But hands down, this next video wins the internet this week. All the way from St. Teresa Point, Manitoba, it's the boys from Fabian's Corner Studio.
Throw your hands up in
Everybody. That video has already racked up over 1 million views on Facebook, which means you guys win the internet this week. And that means I'm even going to give you one of these. We'll be in touch, boys. We've got to take a short break, so don't go away.
Did you know we got the social medias?
Man, don't lie.
It's true. Like the Laughing Drum on Facebook and follow us on Twitter right now.
All right, welcome back to the Laughing Drum, television so profoundly Indigenous. Ernest Monias writes beautiful, beautiful songs about us. And speaking of beautiful things, my guest tonight is a Gitxsan writer whose first book is a beautifully illustrated story about the life of the Sockeye salmon. Brett Houston is here. Welcome, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So tell us about this book. What is the story of the Sockeye mother?
Basically, the story of the Sockeye mother goes from the birth and to the death of the salmon. It goes through its life cycle. And I wrote this book because I wanted to give our young people the perspective of living on the land and to see how everything is truly connected.
It's beautifully illustrated. Tell us a bit about how that. Who's the illustrator and how did that come about?
I lucked out. I got to work with an amazing illustrator named Natasha Donovan, and she worked out of Vancouver and Washington. But I saw her artwork, and I really wanted to work with her, and she incorporated some of my artwork with hers, and it was just so beautifully done. I was very lucky to have her on the project and to work with her.
So you're a new writer, like a new published writer. I've known you as a communicator. You used to work here. How did this book come about? How did you suddenly find yourself an author?
Well, like I said, I really wanted to kind of give a different perspective out there for not only young people but everyone. And I wrote an article for Red Rising magazine, and the publisher happened to read the article, and then she got in touch with me and asked if I wished to turn it into a children's book. And so it kind of came about that way. I didn't really think that I would be authoring a book at the beginning, but then I thought it was a great opportunity to get out there to young people, to have my kids see something that they can relate to, and that's part of their culture, and it also showcases how Indigenous people lived with the land and how we evolved our life cycle around the salmons.
Yeah, so there's, this is a book about culture, this is a book about spiritual connections to land and animals, but there's also a lot of science in this as well.
Yeah, and growing up, I wanted to see how everything really worked, and I started to see a connection between our traditional knowledge and things that scientists were explaining. A lot of it they could have just asked us about.
There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of knowledge that we keep, and just because we're using different terminology and we don't necessarily know the terms that they use, we understand the land. We have our own biologists who understand things like the count of the salmon, they understand the cycle of the salmon, they understand where they're going, and we may not use the same terms because it's in our language, but we have that understanding. So there's a lot there that can be connected. We understood that the salmon in death contributed something to the world, and it made the world exist how it exists. But now with science we know that they were bringing nitrogen from the ocean, and they know it comes from the ocean. And that literally fertilizes all of the forest, and everything from the birds to insects to grizzly bears, they get all of that nourishment from the salmon, that nitrogen in particular.
Was science something that you were into since you were young?
Yeah, I grew up having a lot of input from my auntie and my dad. My auntie bought me a subscription to Equinox magazine. My dad always had popular science around. The things that I grew up loving, was related a lot to science because it was around me all the time, and also growing up being out on the land itself and seeing the way the world actually worked was very interesting to me, and it was something that I originally wanted to get into.
Were you a nerd?
Yeah, I was pretty nerdy. I was a geek. I am guilty for sure. I was a geek to the nth level. I loved.
But that's not a bad word anymore. When people say they're geek or they're nerd or stuff like that. Now it's like it's
a badge of honor.
It's a badge of honor. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, like, are you passing this sort of thing on to your children?
Yes, definitely. My kids, you know, I really want them to understand that there's more to the world than just the human society. You know, we've kind of put ourselves on a pedestal and we believe ourselves to be above what the earth is. So we kind of forget our connection to the land. We kind of forget that, you know, if that salmon disappears, there will be no rainforest in British Columbia, and that will severely impact the environment. So that's the kind of stuff that I try to impart on them. Yeah. And also you try to take them out there as much as I can, but it's very different, you know, like we're not back home in the freedom of my territory.
Yeah, you're living in Winnipeg.
Yeah, we live in Winnipeg now, so it's harder to get my kids out to free territory the way that I grew up.
Yeah, that's pretty heavy stuff for a kid. Is it? How do they take that?
They, you know, I think just speaking with your kids straightforward and, you know, being honest with them about things, and so they understand that the world is like that. It's not that big deal for them. Once they grow up with it and it's natural for them, it kind of incorporates into their everyday life, and they get a different appreciation for the world.
Does yelling help?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes they just, you know, you got to yell.
You just need to drill it into them a little bit, yeah. Yeah, no, it's an absolutely amazing book. You mentioned that you had a chance to work with an illustrator. Was the illustrator Indigenous?
Yes, she's a Métis artist, and but that, you know, originally that wasn't why I started to work with her. She's had some beautiful artwork, but it was just lucky that, you know, she was a Métis artist out of originally kind of she was living in BC, but I think she lives in Washington now, and just a hop, skip, and a jump across the border. So I'll be going to British Columbia in April to do a book launch there. I'll be touring the book, and she's going to be able to participate in that one. So that's it's awesome, and I really, you know, I've like I said, I love her work, and I'm glad that she's going to be on for my future projects as well.
So, what's it like to like? How is it being received? Sorry.
I've been getting a lot of great feedback. Not only from children, but I find a lot of adults are giving me a lot of good feedback. Adults are enjoying the information just as much as the kids are. So I get messages every day from people who bought it for their kids, but they read it themselves. And there's a lot of stuff that they didn't know really happened, or that they didn't know the salmon impacted the environment that much.
Okay, one last question, and this is a very serious one.
Shoot.
Who would win in a fight, a sockeye salmon or a pickerel?
Easily sockeye. Easily.
Those are fighting words, I think. Right. My guest tonight has been Brett Hewson. His book, The Sockeye Mother, is published by
Highwater Press.
Highwater Press. Thanks for being such a good sport and coming on our show.
Thank
I've
you
got
very
a
much for having me.
very, very special gift here for you. All guests on our show receive one of these.
Oh, yeah.
Soon to be a collector's item.
Yes.
Yes, the Laughing Drum canned luncheon meat. That is for you, my friend.
And I didn't have my lunch right now. So
well, there you go. Now you can crack that open on the drive home. We've got to take a short break. Thank you again, Brett, for being here. Don't you dare go anywhere.
Did you know we got the social medias?
Man, don't lie.
It's true. Like the Laughing Drum on Facebook and follow us on Twitter right now.
All right, welcome back to the show. My distinguished Red Power panel here is here to weigh in on the biggest issues facing Indigenous peoples today. We'll get to that in just a minute, but first there's something I want to address, and I am actually going to be serious now. This past week has been a difficult one for Indigenous peoples. The events in a Saskatchewan courtroom have left many people sad and angry. We won't be discussing that on tonight's show, but wiser people than me say that laughter is medicine. And although that always seemed like a cliche, I actually believe it now. So hopefully we can give this country some medicine tonight and in the future. Okay? All right, moving on. Let's get to the Red Power panel. They are legendary Anishinaabe comic Jerry Barrett.
Oh, hey, hello, hey!
Laughing Drum contributor Alyssa Kickson. And a man whose mustache continues to turn heads and break hearts, Sasha Marks. All right, guys, let's talk about Hollywood. A new movie is about to hit theaters. Black Panther is based on the Marvel comic of the same name and features a black superhero.
You will not be able to stay home, brother.
Is it time?
Hell yeah.
Yeah?
Hell yeah, it's time. I mean, I feel like we should already be past this,
Yeah.
but, you know, if it's happening, you know, today, then that's great. You know, that's a step forward.
It is a step forward, but there's also like a lot of grounds to cover now. Like we're just like at the cusp of it, you know.
Yeah.
When we think of a lot of superheroes, we don't see a lot of like indigenous superheroes, like Asian superheroes, black superheroes.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to the forefront of things, it's like probably easier to name like 3 alien superheroes rather than like 3 indigenous superheroes at the point. So it's like you know, we're getting there, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done
Yeah.
too in that forefront.
Jared?
Well, I think the Black Panther movie, at first I thought it was something about a 60s right activist group, but no, Black Power. But no, Black Panther, awesome movie. It's getting rave reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. 98% of the people love the movie in pre-shows and whatnot, so I think that's awesome. But they're very careful in developing the character and the settings and the cultural representation, so they've got all their ducks in a row here, you know. So, the Black Panther, I love the Black Panther, but I'm waiting for the superhero Pink Panther to come out. I think
they did that
Pink
already.
Panther, yeah, no. I think Pink Panther would be an awesome superhero, you know, watching out for feminist rights and looking after two-spirited people. The Pink Panther would be awesome. And I think the sidekick to Pink Panther might be Giant Tiger from the indigenous world. So they prowl the streets of the inner city looking out for our people.
Who would, beyond Giant Tiger, who do you think would make a good indigenous superhero? Or what kind of indigenous superhero would you like to see?
I'd like to see a woman.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'd like to see like a fierce Anishinaabe or Cree or Inuit woman just, you know, kick ass. Like just, you know, like, but in a good way.
Yeah, of course.
I think one of the most like underrated superheroes that is like indigenous is like Forge from the X-Men. Like he has the coolest superpower ever. He can like invent anything, and he's just like no spotlight in anything. It's like, he's so cool, and he's just like, where are you? We need you more in the X-Men. So it's just like it's
I'd love to be able to
yeah.
Well, I went to Hollywood. I wrote a script called based on the Legend of Wendigo, and it involves a really super cool ex-commando black ops unit, and the leader of the group is an indigenous guy named John Sky, and he goes to fight. He doesn't know it at the point, but he goes to fight a Wendigo in the high Arctic. And I pitched that to a Hollywood producer, and he said, you know what? That's no one down here in the States wants to see a Native American actor on screen. We don't like that story. Why don't you go take your script, go back to Canada, and you produce it yourself. You do that, because nobody down here is interested. And I thought, wow, okay. And so I came home.
So screw you, Hollywood.
Yeah. Well, that producer.
Yeah, the producer.
Yeah. So that was one opinion of one producer in Hollywood.
You think it's time now?
Yes, it is time. And I think we've had some really powerful people out there that that could be like smoke signals. You know, Victor. Yeah.
Hey, Victor.
Well, and Thomas starts the fire.
Builds the fire.
Builds the fire. Thomas builds the fire. Could be a superhero.
Yeah.
He could be bit by a
It could be like Batman and Robin.
Batman and Robin. Yeah. Batman and Eagle or something like that. Eagle. Yeah. And remember the native guy from Beachcombers?
Jesse from the Beachcombers.
Jesse from the Beachcombers could be developed into a superhero.
Well, I haven't seen what I would like to see him have his own show.
I think he gets bit by Jesse gets bit by a radioactive clam that's washed in from Japan and then develops powers. And
I would watch that.
Saves the Sunshine Coast.
Okay, let's move on. Something that I'm sure affects all three of you. A comedy club in Winnipeg has come out with an anti-harassment and anti-douchebaggery policy that has some crying censorship. We Johnnies, that's the name of the club, has banned harassment, hatefulness, and other crap behavior, and threatens to kick out both performers and audience members who break the rules.
Yeah.
What do you guys make of that?
I think it is definitely a step forward, especially as a queer Indigenous woman. performing in the Winnipeg comedy scene, it is one of the scariest things to have to do, to walk into a new place or a new venue and go, am I all right here? Can I perform here? And I think a lot of the sort of backlash on this policy is people just like read the words and say, oh, well, I should be able to talk about, racism or sexism. The policy doesn't say you can't talk about it. Like, most of my career is talking about my experiences with homophobia and racism and ableism. I still do that, and I haven't been kicked out. You just can't be it. You just can't be super racist. You can't be sexist. You can't harass people.
Does that happen a lot though in comedy clubs?
Yes.
Like you have people that.
A lot.
Yeah, no,
it is rampant.
It happens.
Really?
I was at a venue recently, and they were saying, they were promoting. They were talking about this anti-policy that was just put up at Wee Johnny's, and they were saying things that were very uncomfortable on stage, and also like being a gay man, watching these acts go up on stage, and you're like listening for like 2 hours of these people going on set about like talking about the LGBT communities in a negative fashion, talking about the like racially things in a negative way as well, and you're like listening to this for like 2 hours, and you're like, I could just get this from my grandparents, like it's like like why am I here? So it's still rampant in the city too, and in some aspects too. So
well, a lot of my mentors when I was coming up through the comedy system were some of the top comics in Canada, including Ron James. Big Daddy Taz took me on the road for years with him. I was his opening act, and I learned a lot about respecting the room, right? Respect yourself, respect the room. If you have something, really deep to say, you can say it, but we're there to make people laugh, and they're spending money to come out to support a fundraiser or support the comedy club. So you don't want to be too intimidating and chase the room away. That's what I learned. And people like Brent Butt, they helped me craft my jokes. And because I was dealing with Indigenous issues, they saw how important it was. So if my set didn't go well afterwards, they say, hey, we see what you're trying to do there, but maybe try this, maybe try that, and they'd help me along.
All right, we got to wrap it up there. That's our show for tonight. Thanks to Brett Hewson for coming on tonight, talking about his beautiful book. Thank you, of course, to our Red Power panel for coming out and weighing in on the news. They are Alyssa Kickson, Sasha Mark, and Jerry Barrett. We'll see you all back here next Tuesday. I'm Tim Fontaine. Good night.